And good morning, everyone. This is not good. You don't seem to have had enough coffee yet. There was no reaction. All right. So today, in a very brief period of time, I want to overview Committee 4. Only one piece of which actually relates to post-accident recovery. The entire day, in fact, will be devoted to things that are related to Committee 4 because, as I will mention in a moment, we also look at the protection of the environment. So very quickly, we'll talk about the mandate. I will take a moment or two to remind all of you of how the system of protection is actually applied, and then to look at the committee's program of work. As you have heard several times already now, the ICRP has moved in this term to start looking at integrating protection of the environment with everything else in the system of protection, because it is one system. And we believe that the holistic and integrated view is necessary in order to bring all the pieces together to allow each of you to do the right work in the right way at the right time. So, historically, you may have remembered this over the last 3 terms. We were very, very grateful and blessed to have Committee 5 doing a tremendous amount of work trying to help us develop from the very beginnings the approach for protection of the environment. But we have now moved to try and bring that expertise into each of our areas. Not because it is any less important, but because in fact it becomes more important that we bring it all together and we start to enable you to use those tools. So we have 4 committees. You have heard descriptions of this several times. What's the mandate? Develop principles and recommendations for ideological protection of people and the environment, or you could say and the environment and the people who must live in the environment in all of the exposure situations. So the mandate is very broad and encompassing. So our system of protection. From the beginning, we've thought about and tried to figure out ways to provide protection for sources that we introduce. First, that was, of course, to try and prevent the burns. And 1 Rankine per hour was good. Your hand didn't turn red. Everyone thought they were fine. Now there are many other things that we have to start to look at. We build this system solidly on 3 foundations. The ethical principles, which were talked about already, and some of the sessions that ran in parallel with this. All of the scientific information. Without the science, we don't have anything. But we also have nothing if we do not have our experience, and we can reflect on the experience, and we can help to move forward so that we can learn the lessons from the experience. The principles of protection, of justification, and optimization, and limitation in each of the exposure situations, with each of the various dose criteria in each of the categories. And you will notice already that I have written here the environment as a category and the derived consideration reference levels as one of the dose criteria. This is something that we continue to discuss in our integration. So, all of that's very nice, you say, Dr. Cole, but how do you make that work? Well, in fact, in any situation, you must start by characterizing the exposure. If you don't know that it's there, you can do nothing, of course. Then you justify taking some actions. And then perhaps you start to identify individuals, populations in the environment that warrant specific attention. And then you can start optimization. And I suggest to you that the sooner you start to engage the stakeholders, not only to inform them, not only for there to be a bit of interaction, but to learn from them their preferences and their knowledge of what needs to be done, the better that process can be. And start to continue to influence the whole distribution of doses towards lower values and reduce inequity and move through the process. That process can be applied in every exposure situation and circumstances. The details, of course, will be different, but the process remains the same. So with that, the Committee for Program of Work in the last 10 minutes that I have, we have 5 major areas that we're looking at. We have ongoing work defining how to do this in existing exposure situations, the emergency exposure situations, and the lessons from Fukushima, which is the particular topic of this morning's sessions, some of the foundations and fundamentals, the environment, and some topical reports. So in the existing exposure situation, there were 2 reports that were published during this previous term, radon and cosmic radiation in aviation. We have 2 groups that are active now, Task Group 76 on naturally occurring radioactive materials, Task Group 98 on contaminated sites. We also have some things that we will start to look to. And this week there have already been quite a few discussions on the question of, well, now that Elon Musk and Bronson and others say that if you give me $10 million, I help you to fly to Mars, we no longer have just this very little special set of occupational, but we have members of the public. So we will begin to look at space travel. We will also begin to look at some point during this term at the connection between existing and planned situations in the area of decommissioning. In the emergency exposure situations and the things that we will be talking about some today, Task Group 93 continues the development of the revision of publications 109 and 111. That process has benefited immensely from the work of the ICRP dialogue and a whole stakeholder interaction that has worked continuously with the committee there in Japan. But there is much work to be done in that area too, because that report will deal with a large reactor accident. There are many other things that can happen, and as we look back, the last time the Commission addressed other issues was publication 96. So we plan to start looking at some work to update how to respond in emergencies that are not a large reactor accident. And then there are issues that warrant some more attention, including how do you handle pets, livestock, and other animals in an emergency situation? For those of you who like your little dog or cat, to be told that you cannot bring it if you are told to evacuate is not a very good answer. And there's also the question of businesses impacted by it, both the question of whether their products are contaminated, but how to deal with their employees, what kinds of questions are answered, how to work through the process of discussing this with your end users and otherwise. So there's much work yet to be done in that area. The Foundations of Protection, Task Group 94's report on the ethical foundations in the system is completed. It was approved by the main commission for publication just a couple of days ago, and we'll be going into the publication cycle. But that only begins the process, because that resets a framework of consideration. But now we have to start moving towards, how do I actually use that in decision making? How do I use that to help to inform a decision in this controversial subject where there are very strongly opposed views, and you have the people who come into the first meeting who sit on the opposite sides of the room and throw verbal rocks at each other? How do you deal with this in the medical situation? Of course, the medical ethics is where much of this began. But in fact, there are significant dilemmas that I'll be working with Committee 3, Kimberly Applegate, and the group to try and look at that. Exactly what did you mean by reasonable when you said that we should reduce exposures as low as reasonably achievable economic, social, and environmental considerations being taken into account? Protection of the environment has been a very active program. We will be finishing up the work related to the RBE and the reference animals. The Task Group 74 report on dosimetry is in the publication cycle, will be coming out shortly. There are several ongoing works, one which we share with Committee 1 on the reference animal and plant monographs to start bringing in information that has come to light since the previous time, as well as Task Group 105 down on the bottom, which will be looking at some historical sites and how we can apply it and we can learn the lessons. As well as that, we have a task group of the main commission, which will both be working with Committee 4 as we develop a consistent approach to applying it in every single report that we write, and ensuring that all of the activities of the committees are well coordinated together. In addition to that, we know that there are lots of other things that do not automatically fit into a particular theme. And so we have written over the course of the time several reports that are on particular topics, such as security screening, such as cosmic radiation. We have two ongoing right now, one looking at surface and near-surface disposal of solid waste, which is a follow-on to publication 122, which dealt with geologic repositories. And we have Task Group 106, which was approved not that long ago, starting to look at mobile high-activity sources and the very unique challenges faced in industrial radiography and other situations where you don't have the advantage of a large fixed facility and lots of shielding. No, you must prove that the weld on that pipe, which is 30 meters up on the scaffold in -5-degree temperatures, is going to hold when you start the refinery back up tomorrow. So there are a number of activities that we do there. So to quickly rack up, Committee 4 in this term is 18 members, 12 different countries, 5 major areas of work. We currently have 8 active task groups, and there will be a number more that we will be discussed. We're trying to work with each of the other committees to try and make sure that we look at and carefully think about the application, whether it is a scientific report, a medical report, a modeling report, so that it all works together very well, considering that you are the ones who need to take it and use it and apply it. And we look forward to trying to elaborate the systems. And with that, I thank you very much. That's it.